So we're here today with Kristin. Kristin has a center in Cromwell, Elevate Healing Arts. And so I've invited her here today. We're just going to talk about intuition and what it means to us and kind of how we got to where we are today and using our intuition. But before we do, I don't know, Kristin, do you want to share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So, hello. I have a healing arts center called Elevate Healing Arts in Cromwell, Connecticut. And I would say the easiest way to explain what we do here is we create space where the arts, so music and art, the creative arts, can not only coexist with the holistic alternative healing arts, but really be merged. So we do, I personally do numerology, energy work. I work with essential oils. I do sound healing. And we have other people here who offer many other awesome services as well.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, it's a great place. You made such a wonderful space there. It really does feel welcoming and like a
Thank
space that
you.
you just want to go and be in.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
usually don't want to leave.
It is a really great space. It's magical. So I wanted to talk to different people about intuition, what it means to them, kind of how they use it in their lives, because I think everyone's really unique when it comes to how they connect with their higher self and how their soul speaks to them. And so that's really the purpose of this little interview, is just to get to know a little bit about you and your journey towards becoming more and more intuitive and using that in your life. So maybe we can just start off with how do you define intuition? What does that mean to you?
That's a great question. I think of intuition as the extra senses. So I hear, I see, I feel, I touch, I smell, and then intuition is just like bringing all those things up a notch where we can see what might not be visible to the eye. We hear what might not be audible to the ear. So just tuning in, really being plugged into the energy around us. And I think of intuition as our gift and what we use to feel and sense and know and understand, again, things that aren't maybe present, like this, this notebook in front of me or whatever, things that I can't see in a concrete, tangible way. But yet we still see, we still understand, we still feel that. That's interesting. I haven't ever tried to define intuition, but I think
Yes.
that's what it is for me. It's like, when people say they've got a gut feeling, they know, I've got a hunch, and it's learning to trust and work with our innate, internal guidance system, and the cues and language from our body and energy around us.
Yeah, totally. And it's really interesting because when I looked up the actual definition on Merriam-Webster or whatever website, it did talk about that it's not about the rational world outside of
Mhm.
you. It's about using all that inner knowing. But what was really interesting to me, and an aspect of that definition, is that it's more spontaneous too. So it doesn't give you time to
Yeah.
think or rationalize at all. And I think that's the part when you talk about trusting and just going with it. If you give yourself the time, then you can talk yourself out of, oh, that was just a voice that I heard, and it's just
Mhm.
me and it's my imagination. But what I think intuition really wants you to do is to stay in that place of imagination and not give yourself time to venture out of it. So I feel the same way. I would define intuition the same way you did, very much about the inner senses and not so much about being able to rationalize and explain it to other people. It's a just
Mhm.
knowing and staying in that knowing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's taken me a long time to get to that place of not having to rationalize. I would consider myself a pretty analytical, detail-oriented, analytical person. But yeah, I think when we really embrace our intuition and our intuitive gifts and connection, um, it becomes easier and easier to just trust it as I would my sense of, touch and feeling and smell. It's just something your body's communicating to you,
Yeah.
just as real and just as valid.
Well, that was another one of my questions actually was, could you
Oh,
talk a little bit about that journey of how you got, because I think
yeah,
we're always evolving more and more, hopefully, and
totally.
becoming more and more intuitive. But where did you start from and how did you get to where you are now?
Hmm. Well, I go back to childhood, and I think as a child, I probably had that inner feeling or inner knowing without really knowing what it was. Denise, one of my friends and colleagues here at Elevate, we say this all the time. It's like we feel like we knew things we weren't supposed to know. It's just, and I think probably a lot of children today experience that as well. And so what started becoming more and more prominent and clearer to myself, and fortunately my mother, who was able to kind of foster this development a little bit, was I was really plugged into my dreams as a kid. So I would say I had premonitions. I would have dreams that felt so vivid and so real to me. And I would wake up and the next day I would see something from my dream. And so this would happen more and more frequently. And I would actually tell my family and tell my mom, like, oh, I had a dream that this is happening today or whatever. And my mom would say, that is happening today, or something like that, or like even crazy weather phenomenons. I had a dream once before a tornado, and I live in Connecticut. Like, we did not have tornadoes. This was not a normal thing, but I saw stuff flying around. I saw particular people that I knew in my life who were characters in this dream. And the next day we had some freak tornado come through
Wow.
that directly impacted those people that I saw in my dream. So at some point as a child, my mom actually did have me keep a journal and said, you should mark these things down.
Wow.
That's a special gift. And that was really cool.
Yeah.
Um, and I used to play little games with my brother, even where I would try to guess like what colored pencil he he was hiding behind his back, or just by intuitively sensing. I'm looking back. I think what I was doing was I was intuitively sensing like what color he was drawn to, or whatever. But I would do these little things, but somewhere along the way, obviously, it got pushed under the rug, probably more into my teenage years when I wanted to be rational and I wanted to be right. I didn't want to be like out in the clouds.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say it took me a long time to really fully trust that again, which had already been evident and available to me as a child. It wasn't until probably early adulthood that I started to really awaken and open back up to it.
Yeah. I think that's pretty common. I think that's pretty
Mhm.
common. And I think too that you probably had flashes even when you were trying to be shutting it down.
Mhm.
I can think about flashes of moments where I
Right.
really was tuned in and then I kind of, it would be a couple of years
Mhm.
before I
Yeah.
had another one of those really connected moments. So
Yeah.
dreams is one of the ways your soul speaks to you. What other ways, like what are the clear senses for you that feel those are the ones that are more dominant
Mhm.
for you?
Well, I think when I think about dreams, I think clairvoyance, the way I see things, might be shown to me in almost that movie like visual that I would see and experience in something like a dream. But I
Mhm.
also see signs. I'll see something at just the right time. Like I'm a numerologist, I'm a numbers person, but I'll see numbers or I'll see things that I know where I just know it's no coincidence. So once I started connecting the dots and discovering what synchronicity is, meaningful coincidences, everything just started, I started seeing more and more and more.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say clairaudience was actually what as I really had my spiritual awakening and I was finally open to working with my intuition, I definitely discovered that I'm clairaudient because and I think like you had said, this probably was happening repeatedly, like throughout, childhood and adulthood. And I just like pushed it down or didn't think much of it, but I was definitely having conversations with loved ones and in spirit and hearing things where I probably at one point did think I was crazy, but then realized it was actually my clairaudience. And then clairsentience, the
Mhm.
feeling. I definitely, being an empath, I take on energy. I started noticing this more and more before I was able to really manage my sensitivity, that I would
Yeah.
take on other people's pain or anxiety or feelings, and I would just get feelings in my body. Um, and the claircognizance and all that, it's like, I just sometimes you just know something, you have the inner knowing. But if I had to pick two, it would be the clairaudience and the clairvoyance, I guess.
Yeah. I think we all
Mhm.
kind of touch on all of them, but I think there are some
Mhm.
that are more dominant and maybe come to us easier or flow
Mhm.
easier for us than others. So
Yeah.
just to touch back in, I think you talked about your spiritual awakening and um,
Mhm.
kind of practicing a more full awareness that is happening, it's occurring, it's a part of our lives, that intuitive whatever clear sense that
Mhm.
we're using. So is it something that has been growing for you as at once you went on that path of awareness and really starting to practice being open and listening and feeling and sensing in those ways? Has it become easier
Mhm.
for you or more frequent for you?
Yeah, good question. I would say, well, I, when I think about my awakening, I go back to a specific time where I was actually in someone else's gallery reading, someone who was channeling loved ones in spirit. And I remember being so interested and curious and really excited, but but again, it was almost like I was in hiding still. And sitting in this space, I was seeing bright lights. I was getting headaches. Like I felt like someone was gonna have to like walk me out there, hold my hand and walk me out.
Wow.
I was just feeling so much. And pretty much from that point on, particularly after I had opened up to the possibility of how much love there is for me on the other side and how accurate these messages were that were being channeled through. That was kind of a new experience for me. And ever since then, it's like they just kept giving me more. And I say they, my angels and guides and loved ones, like it just kept coming. Like the gate was open and it was just flooding in. So from that point forward, I want to say things happened very quickly. And I felt probably most connected, to things like clairvoyance and new clairs that I was discovering at that time, because I started meditating more. I started really stopping to listen. I started I started to pause and really try to see. And because I became open to that, I would get things like past life memories or whatever, things that were just so fast and so almost overwhelming. But I managed to find all the resources that I needed at that time. And as a numerologist, I can say, like, looking at my the timeline, my forecasting, my birth chart, it's no coincidence when this happened, like of my personal year of spiritual transformation and all that. So I see that in other people's birth charts, and many times they're going through a similar experience where they're able to go so deeply within that they just come out a new person. So I'm going off on a tangent, but to answer your question, I would say it started fast, and then because I really just needed to essentially like transform, I almost felt like I was born again. And I had a new concept of like what my reality was. I had dug up so many truths. There was no way I would go back. I had a lot to work through, a lot of fear and a lot of, fear of judgment, a lot of lessons that I had to really be brave enough to work through in order to embrace those new truths that I could not disregard. Um, but it became more manageable. And I would say I'm at a point now where it's like I guess I'm always learning. Like every day there's an opportunity to learn and grow. So the journey has not lightened. Well, it's illuminated. It has not like slowed down. It just doesn't feel quite as overwhelming, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good point. It doesn't, there are points when you feel fear or you're uncertain or um, it just feels like you don't know the next step or whether what you're supposed to be doing or if it feels right or not.
Mhm.
And you just have to stay in a place of awareness and love, I think, and just compassion for yourself to get through
That's what
that.
it is. I
Yeah.
mean, and when we find unconditional love and like feel what that feels like, which to me to be truly intuitively plugged in a way that's productive and helpful is to like it always comes back to love and trust and a faith in a higher kind of love. Um, then nothing has to be really scary anymore. It's just fun.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. Like
Yeah.
what a fun, crazy, exciting time to be alive. It's a lot
Yeah.
happening.
And I think anyone who is open to kind of starting to explore intuition has a curiosity, and that's the first step. And the rest of it, you can kind of let it flow. And I really want people to understand that everyone's journey is different and everyone's way of opening up and getting to know their intuition and their soul language is completely different.
Mhm.
Because that was one of my stumbling blocks. And so when I talk about love and compassion for self, that's really where I had to practice that a lot, where it wasn't about comparing or some people being more able than others. It's
Yeah.
something we're all born with, and we just need to explore and just kind of,
Yeah. And I also I want to say I think a lot of people just assume that in order to be intuitive or they'll compare themselves to others and think like, well, if I'm not connecting with spirit on the other side and channeling loved ones, and if I'm not able to see, you know, the face of a loved one or whatever, then I'm not intuitive. And that's not, as you said, absolutely not the case where we're infusing everything with our intuition. And the way I use my intuitive senses or gifts might look very, very different from how someone else does. And I use this in my work. I mean, my background, I didn't say this, but my background is in education and in music education. And I know that just by being an intuitive person before I even knew I was able to connect with children in a way that maybe others just couldn't or whatever, right? Like I was able to have a special connection with children because I was intuitive. I don't have to be, yeah, living the life of, some of the spiritual teachers that we say, oh, they're intuitive. They're able to be the channel and the presenter and whatever all the time. Like, I think what you and I try to do is help others, find their intuitive gifts and use them where they're supposed to be using
yeah,
them. Right.
exactly. So the
Mhm.
last question is, if you could give, so someone's watching this video and they're really either curious about tapping into their intuition or want to make a, a step forward in using intuition more in their life, do you have any like top 3 tips for them on how they can do that?
So top 3 ways that others could use
Yeah.
intuition.
Yeah, how
Mhm.
can someone become more intuitive or more in tune with their intuitive language?
Hmm. I would say probably number one is to intentionally set aside some time, some quick time even, just for reflection, to pause and just, again, like if someone's got a 5-minute coffee break, step outside and just listen. And like, what do you hear? I think part of being intuitively connected is being present and right, grounded and present as a human to be able to
Yeah.
connect. So taking time to really, like, things pass us by, but even as we're driving, just kind of looking around you, what am I seeing? What am I noticing? You might see a license plate with a name or some number signs that feel meaningful, maybe a birthday of a loved one or something, things that we sometimes don't pick up when we're just in that monotonous, like, rush, rush, rush. So even just 5 minutes every day to intentionally decide, I'm going to be present and I'm open to seeing or hearing whatever wants to be shown to me.
Mhm.
Um, Number two, let's see. I think this is funny because this isn't one that I actually use a lot, but it just came to me, is like the free writing. Just because I think a lot of people really do connect through journaling.
Yeah.
And if people can, like, give themselves, they don't even need a writing prompt, but just no boundaries, no limits, just I feel, and then just start writing without even thinking about it and without judging what's coming out. And I think people will be amazed at what comes up that has been quiet or hidden or dormant. So even just bringing out, again, the human stuff and realizing how extra sensitive and aware we can be if we choose to be, uh, to what's going on in our bodies and in our minds. And three, into, I think, I guess, okay, the next thing that's coming to me, and I do a lot of sound healing, so I'm like picturing my crystal bowls, and obviously if anyone can treat themselves to something that's going to raise their vibration and help them to come into greater harmony and balance of mind, body, spirit. So whether that's sound healing, which does wonders for me, or walking barefoot outside, eating clean foods, pulling cards. I'm surprised that wasn't my first thing, because that actually really helped me when I got my first angel card deck, and I would just reflect, and I would barely call it meditating, but it is meditating. And I would just kind of think about something, or ask a question and pull a card, and I would always see exactly what I needed to, first of all, know just how connected we are, that
Mhm.
there's no coincidence. And second of all, to just continue to facilitate that reflection and mindfulness. But anything that's going to help people feel healthier and happier and more aligned. It could be receiving semi-regular Reiki sessions or whatever. I think the
Yeah.
more we can come into harmonious alignment, the more, or the easier it is to open up.
Yeah. Awesome tips. Thank you so much.
I ramble. I know.
Well, it's important to share, I think, so that others see
Yeah.
that we've followed this path already, and that it is
Mhm.
possible, and there's really wonderful things that come to you from doing it.
Mhm.
I totally think that, like you, it changed my life as soon as I started
Yeah.
being willing to open myself up to this. Um,
Yeah.
and I
There's
do feel
willingness.
like it's definitely a never ending path. Like, I don't see the path ending for me, and me or getting to the top of the mountain and being like, I've done it all, I've gotten it all, I've seen it
Done.
all. Like, yeah, exactly. Finish that. But for me, that's an exciting part. You can always learn more about yourself and about the world that you're living in a whole new way. So
Yeah.
thank you
I
so
think
much for sharing.
every day that you and I are on this earth, we are supposed to be learning something, right?
Yes.
We're supposed
Yeah.
to be just practicing something and learning and giving back something. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I really feel like if there's one thing that every human has in common, it's reincarnate and take this form so that we can get to know ourselves again. Because they do talk about how, that amnesia of as soon as you take a physical form, you kind of get this amnesia. But I think that's the kernel, the core of every human journey, is to get to know who you are truly again and express that in the world.
Yeah, we
So
deserve to be able to do that.
yeah,
So thank
totally.
you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
I know. All right. I'll see you later.